good day to you wherever you are. Two exciting books for you today. One I'm going to mention quite quickly. The other we're going to go into in depth because I'm going to be talking to the author directly. But first of all, I want to show you this book. It's called The Generals. The Generals. 69 generals, 69 authors, 69 lessons in history. And the generals go from Hannibal to Napoleon, from Shaka Zulu to Jan Smuts, from Rommel to Moshe Dayan. And it's so interesting to see each essay on each general is written by either a historian or a former military commander or a very well-known author. So you've got a great range of authors in it. And just before we started, my producer and technical genius, Richard, we were talking, and I said, one of the things about all these generals, whether it was Hannibal, even going back to the Chinese dynasties, what they all had in common, they led from the front with their men. They were role models. They were actually there with their men, which begs the question, in these days of designer warfare, who motivates the armies? Who actually motivates the men and women and fighters? Anyway, great book. Anybody in your family or friends who love history, it's great, a great Brizzy. But what we're going to talk about in depth is another book. And I want to welcome somebody I've interviewed before, and we had such a fantastic feedback. Welcome, Professor Ryan Blumenthal. Now, who, what, why, where is Professor Ryan Blumenthal? Ryan, Prof, is actually a forensic pathologist. Yeah, don't get upset about that. We'll get that explained. And he's written other books. He's had a television series. One of his books was even translated into Russian. I mean, the mind boggles, Ryan. Anyway, his latest book is called Trace by Ryan Blumenthal. It's published by Tafelberg, and he wrote, you may remember those of you who, he's written several books, but Autopsy was the big bestseller. And this has the subtitle of Case Studies of a Forensic Pathologist in Africa. It's a bit of a long intro, and I mean, he's got more degrees, more distinctions, and he's a very, very distinguished professor. I'll call him Prof, although I'd like to call him Ryan. Anyway, Prof, welcome to you and congratulations on a very readable book.
Yeah, God bless. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and I'm so thrilled to be here. As you know, I mean, you're one of my heroes, like really. So I'm so thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Ryan. Now, I've already introduced you as a very distinguished forensic pathologist. Now, immediately, I know some people are they've got vague ideas of what a forensic pathologist does. Can you tell us in layperson's terms exactly what it is you do and why?
Yeah, most listeners won't know what a forensic pathologist is. And there's different names for this around the world. In America, we're called medical examiners. In Europe, we're called coroners. However, in South Africa, we're forensic pathologists. And what we do is we determine what happened, why someone dies. So we are there to determine, if there's a questionable death, whether it's accident or homicide or suicide, what happened. We don't know why. I mean, that's for the psychologists, but we can tell you what happened. So we're medical doctors. We study a long time. We generally work for governments, and we are there to find out what happened.
there are lots of quotable remarks in your book and lots of stories that I'm going to come to, but you make one very telling remark at one stage. You say, dead bodies don't lie. Can you talk us through that? What do you mean by that?
Yes, I think that's what puts us in such a favorable situation to really tell you what's happening in the world. Because, from the luxury of my mortuary, for lack of a better word, you can tell so much about what's happening in the world. I mean, you can tell if a new gang has moved into the neighborhood. You can tell the health of the nation. You can tell if there's a new or emergent drug or disease. All this without leaving the mortuary. Because, what a better viewpoint to find out what's happening in the world than the mortuary. I mean, it's like a silent mirror for what's happening in society. So it's a privileged position. It's located in the blind spot of humanity, and therefore it was my duty to share this information. That's why I wrote it, because this is, and there's no narratives to spin here. There's no political agendas. This is literally a reflection. So I'd love the book to speak for itself, but Trace is a reflection of what I've seen in a quarter of a century of autopsies, of 13,000 autopsies. And the cases I chose for the book have all been through integrity and review committees. So these were not picked randomly. They are unusual cases. They all have a story to tell for the living. So it's about the reader. It's not really about the case itself. It's about the reader. And I believe autopsies can help make a better world eventually.
Now, how on earth did you get into this? I mean, little boys, were certainly in my time, they always wanted to be pilots or engine drivers or firemen or something. When you were a little boy, well, I mean, you surely could never have imagined you were going to end up as a coroner stroke medical examiner stroke forensic pathology. How did you get into it, Prof?
Well, I've got a joke in this regard. It's a bit off color, but it's quite humorous. Like, I couldn't have done obstetrics and gynecology because they would have called me Riney the Gynae, which would be too much to... Yeah, I think that's quite funny. It's where I belong to be. So, look, whether I have autism spectrum disorder level 1 with a bit of level 2, who knows? I like to think of it as Jedi Knight level 5. I definitely have a tendency for this field. It's about problem solving. It's about puzzle solving. There's a nerd aspect to this. I think I fit here. It's where I belong to be. I mean, you've seen my bedside manner. I don't think I would do well in anything else. So this is where I belong to be.
Oh, well, I totally disagree on that last remark because, our experience of people in your profession, forensic pathologists, is very much guided by what we've seen on television, CSR, police procedurals, crime stories. And usually the medical examiner, the forensic pathologist, tends to be a very quiet little mouse-like man or woman in the corner of a lab. They're never like the star of the show. But you don't fit that bill. I mean, I've met you, I'm lucky enough to have met you personally. You're very much larger than life. You're not the expected forensic pathologist. What do your students think when they see you? What are they expecting?
Well, I'm trying to find out if this is a compliment or not. I mean, and make no mistake, there are some mouse-like forensic pathologists. I know several of them, although no names will be mentioned. But yeah, it takes all types of personalities. I've been at some international conferences now. There really are some truly amazing people in this field, men and women. They are heroes as far as I'm concerned. These are detectives in white coats. A few of us, want to communicate science. I just think that's like a talent that I have. I want to share some of this knowledge so that we don't see the same type of death twice. So I see us as public health pathologists. We don't want to see the same type of death twice. And we are still doctors. We took the Hippocratic Oath or the Geneva Convention Code. So it's a duty, I think. We've got this duty to serve, and we've got this duty to save. So it's science in service of society. I think that's what my payoff line would be. There has to be some feedback mechanism for the living to see that the same type of death doesn't happen twice.
You made a remark that you're like detectives, and you do say in your book, Trace, that you do need, and you have yourself, an insatiable curiosity. That's your expression. And this insatiable curiosity leads you to what, Prof?
Well, all great science begins with the word why. You need to ask why. The problem nowadays is people have really stopped thinking critically. And once you start asking why, it's amazing. Every single death is a story to tell. And there's some incredible cases in the book that explain this. And it's just by asking why. Like, why did this happen? Why here? Why now? And once you start going down this rabbit hole, the solutions, the biggest mysteries are solved with the tiniest details. And I think that is what Trace is about. Trace is about trace evidence, and we've caught some of the baddest bad people with the smallest little evidence. And trace could be anything from glitter to makeup to pollen to an idea to an emoji. So trace could be anything. And once you see how trace works and how effective it is, you won't see the world the same again. And that is what I wanted to share with the readers.
Yet you talk about this Locard's principle, which defines your work, a medical principle. Is it Locard or Locard? How do I pronounce it? Is it Locard?
Well, Edmond Locard was from Lyon in France in 1643, so there's probably different pronunciations.
But the principle is, as you describe in the book, everything leaves a trace. Everything leaves a trace. And we're not just talking DNA and that kind of science. We're talking physical traces. For example, Prof, what kind of traces?
Well, only human failure to identify it, interpret it, and understand it can diminish its value. And trace, as we said, from Locard's exchange principle, every contact leaves a trace. Every contact leaves a trace. You cannot fool. It's not lost in the excitement of the moment. Every interaction, trace will be deposited on the perpetrator, on the victim, from the scene. It's such a dynamic thing, and you cannot fool this. And once you understand how this works, you'll never see the world the same way again, because it really ships into all spheres of your life, including health and sickness and your happiness and how to grow older. Once you realize your contacts in life, it really affects your life, because if you understand what are good contacts and bad contacts, and intensity, duration, and nature of contact, how hard, how long, and what kind of contact, you realize that the stuff, you can make a difference to your life.
Yeah.
You can really make a difference.
Well, I'm going to come, because you give some very good advice at the end of the book. But before that, I want to ask you, for you, what was your most interesting case, Prof?
Right, so look, I'm an academic, so it would be an academically unusual case. So remember, there's pedestrian run-of-the-mill cases that we see every day here in South Africa, my colleagues, myself. However, every now and again we get something that you just realize, I don't think anyone's seen this. And specifically here in Africa, that saying ex-Africa aliquot semper novi. There's always something new out of Africa. Really holds to this. This is forensic paradise. What we see here, I don't think anyone really sees around the world. We get certain cases here that I just don't think you see everywhere in the world. I can mention a few of them. So we get mob assault here, community assault, or we don't like the word mob justice because that implies justice, and whose justice is this? So we use the word mob assault. We see necklacing, that is a pathognomonically South African or African phenomenon. We see temic, which is aldicarb. We've got our own small creatures and big creatures that kill us in this country. We've got our own fauna and flora deaths. So my book is written specifically from an Africocentric viewpoint, and it's just fascinating, I think, for the reader to see what happens behind the scenes. Because if you're going to judge a country, you judge it by, I think, its emergency rooms and its mortuaries. Because if you see what's coming into their ERs and their mortuaries, you know the health of the nation. There's nowhere to hide at autopsy. There's nowhere to hide.
You've got a story of a wasp. Tell us the story
Correct.
of the wasp.
It's quite a tragic story. All the stories are tragic. However, this one was a 42-year-old white male. He was one of 5 children. The other 4 children had died in car accidents, so he was the last living one of his bloodline. And he was stung on the top of his right foot by a solitary wasp. And he slapped it, and his wife and the mother brought the dead wasp into the mortuary, and he had died 4 hours later from a very rare phenomenon called Conus syndrome, named after the Greek cardiologist George Conus. So what happened was the sting, it's not an anaphylactic reaction, but his vasoamines raised, and he had a heart attack. He had a coronary plaque rupture, and he died from a right coronary artery thrombosis due to this Conus syndrome from a wasp sting. And then it was such a tragic case. There was so much emotion, when I spoke to the mother, the wife, because we needed consent to publish this in the literature. And also we needed to know what specific type of wasp this was. And this wasp traveled more in death than it did in life. I mean, this wasp traveled to find an entomologist that could identify it hundreds of kilometers. And we found out it was a very rare species, a Hymenoptera species. And it was the smallest little thing, and that's working in this field. It kind of makes you philosophical because, we've seen people taken out by a pimple on their nose, and what this book is about is it's what kills you. If you know what kills you, it changes your worldviews. So I also got a humorous line in my book. I say, the law of threes, what kills you. So it's 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and then humorously I said 3 years without a relationship, which I thought was very humorous. But you may live longer than 3 years without a relationship. However,
So
I just thought that was humorous.
3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and as you say, 3 years without a relationship. But also, Prof, what you're saying, it really begs the question, because if you live your life in fear, if you live your life thinking, we're all going to die. Of course we are. Some are going to die earlier than others. But I could walk out of my door and trip over the step and break my neck. You could, please don't. You could electrocute you. You could get stung by a random wasp. We've got to live our lives to the full and enjoy them. And I used to say when I was doing my 702 radio program, believe it or not, I think most people aren't afraid of dying. I don't think they're afraid of death. It's the manner in which we die. And that is what you, as a forensic pathologist, is doing. You are finding out why somebody died. And sometimes it's not always clear cut. You have the case of how you actually thought, I think it was a drowning turned out to be a murder. Tell us about that. Was it?
Well, I think look, I think the book is very positive and optimistic. It's by no means macabre. People have read it from all different walks of life, young and old, and it's very hopeful. And I think the big messages that come out of the book is the resilience, what kind of people do this field, how we get through every single day, seeing what we see, having hope. Hope is so important. So it really wakes you up and shakes you up, I think, and it always grounds you. Every day, you can never get into that mortuary arrogance. It brings you right down to earth every single day. Anyway, there was just a slight aside. However, answering your question on the drowning case, so, the book is peppered with unusual cases. And that case was a crafty murder, which we detected. We always work in teams, and once again, it was solved by means of the smallest details. So there's photographs in the book. There is a front page disclaimer in the book, so there is a trigger warning, because there are photographs in the book. It's a fascinating story. I don't want to give too much away. They would have to read the book. It just turned, it presented. We thought it was a poisoning or a drowning case. However, it was a very crafty murder. It was the subtlest gunshot entrance wound I've ever seen. It was in the pubic hair. It was like a light caliber gunshot wound through the femoral artery. It was so subtle. However, just working slowly, methodically, carefully, the truth will out.
And you actually, and without giving too much away, you actually found the bullets that you were not expecting to. And as
correct,
as Prof says, there are a lot of photographs in the book, but don't worry, they're bones, and you're not going to lose sleep or have nightmares. I promise you. And they do illustrate Prof's stories extremely well. Now, you also, this is something that interests me as an English scholar or as a student of language. You talk about something called an idiolect. I'll spell that, IDIOLECT, idiolect. And you say it's an individual linguistic fingerprint. Now, can you explain that? Because that's so interesting. So we can be caught in a murder, not just because we leave fingernails or a trace of pollen, but maybe because of the way we speak or write. Just talk us through that.
Okay, so by way of introduction, I was just describing what is trace evidence. And then I'm a forensic pathologist, and this is the realm of the question and documents forensic scientist. However, I just thought, let me allude to this. So this is not my field of absolute expertise. And there was a very big case in South Africa now, the Solly Maninga case, where people were taken down because of an emoji. So an idiolect is a way of signing off your text. Everyone's got their own little idiolect, their little smiley face or their little emoji. And if you look at some of the big cases, such as the Unabomber case with Ted Kaczynski, he wrote a manifesto and he had letters. And the way he spoke in the manifesto and the letters, you could see this was the same person, because he had this way of speaking. He said, you could have your cake and eat it too. And he used that was his line, that was his way of speaking. It was his almost idiolect. And so too when we got our own emojis that we use when we send our texts. So, and this is now being used in crime to catch people. So every contact leaves a trace.
But this, Prof, would that stand up in court? I'm thinking, you say it was in the Unabomber's manifesto, the actual way he phrased things. Finally, they got him because of that, and obviously it did stand up in court. What did they do? They then traced his language and the way he spoke now, or at the time, back to his manifesto, and they were able to charge him on that. It seems a bit like a fairy tale.
Well, that's the thing. Look, when we're building a case, we want data. And, how much data is necessary data to convince someone or to convict someone? And all of these little pieces of trace evidence go into the pot. And eventually a case is built. So, And the more data you have, the stronger the case. So, it was broadly speaking, just to show you how evidence, because this is about evidence and it's about data and it's about building a case. And, we've caught people of pollen. I'm not a fan of glitter. I go on a rampage against glitter in my book here because, if you go into a wedding with glitter makeup, by the end of the evening, everyone will be covered in glitter. And I've actually performed autopsies where I've cut open the intestines, and what do I find? Glitter. And what is glitter if not plastic? And there are even some glitters that are made of glass and metal. It doesn't decompose easily. I'm not a fan of glitter.
So, and towards the end of the book, you give some very good advice about living. I just want to read this book because I want you to explain exactly what you mean. You have some life lessons, and this is one of the lessons. You call it Lesson 2, You Are a Mammal, and you write, we all live on the crust of this poor planet called Earth and nowhere else. And here, nature doesn't care if you're happy or sad, how much money you have, how powerful you are, how beautiful you are, or how popular you are. The only thing nature cares about is whether you've passed on your genetics or not. It's a bit like Richard Dawkins, The Selfish Gene, whom I interviewed years ago about his book. And then you say, after all, you were born a mammal and you will die a mammal, which means that your needs are also very much mammalian. Just enlarge on that a bit.
All right, well, so this is based on a lot of reading. So we are living on the crust of this poor planet Earth and nowhere else, and we have to share this crust with other humans, and therefore we have to cooperate. So that's very important. We're only living on 6 centimeters of soil that's sustaining us around the whole planet. We're sharing an atmosphere. So I wanted to just bring it in like that, and we are mammals. And not only are our needs mammalian, but our wants are mammalian. And we are born a mammal and we will die a mammal. And, no matter how much you try and negate this, come spend one autopsy with me. And I look a lot at the veterinary literature because, sometimes when I have a real problem, I go and I speak to the vets. The vets are bright. They see it all. And they know tissue respect, and they know they're just dealing with a different type of anatomy. However, it's mammals. So our mechanisms of death are the same as other mammals. And when you realize this, that's what this book's about. I think it just brings you a bit down to earth. It changes your viewpoints. I think the book stays with you afterwards. I'm very proud of it. It took a lot of risk writing it, and it's.
I think the message. You've got several lessons. I think the message is, it's certainly been my philosophy of a very, very long life. Live your life. You don't want to die saying, what if or if only. No. Do it. Do it. Live your life. You have examples at the end of one chapter, and I actually went out to look to see if my jasmine is in bloom. You were saying, as I sit here talking to you, I can see weaver birds. Two of them have already put on their spring breeding plumage. So look at that as a mammal, interact with other mammals and things, live your life, take note of what's going on. Don't be in this pursuit of money, fame, whatever. I think that's your philosophy, isn't it?
Well, it comes down, speaking of the jasmine, and I mentioned this in my previous book also, is the seasonality and the temporality. The bad news is things are temporary, but the good news is things are temporary also. So, if you're going through a good time, you must enjoy it. You must enjoy the flower while it lasts. I mean, that's Freud's flower story. Enjoy the jasmine while it lasts. And if you are going through a bad time, also know that this too shall pass. And that, there's seasons and cycles. And I think this comes across in the book also. So the temporarity of things. So enjoy the good stuff and the bad stuff will pass.
And just one last final question. It's a super book. It's great reading. It's not going to scare you or whatever, but it will interest you very much. Trace, you'll find it in all good bookshops at the moment. One final question, Ryan, Prof. What do you do for fun?
Well, as a self-diagnosed autism spectrum disorder level 1 with slight bits of level 2, which could be Jedi Knight and ninja. I've definitely see patterns in life. So I've got a host of different hobbies. I mountain bike, I bird watch, I play chess. I love sleight of hand magic. I love reading. I'm just curious. I love to travel. Good food. Just trying to get the most of this while I can.
Thank you. And thanks so much for talking to us. And it's fascinating how much you can learn from a dead body. And as Prof was saying, you can actually see the health of a nation. One thing you say, let's leave with a bit of a caveat, a bit of a warning. You always say that the most times you see dead bodies are when the bars close on a Saturday night. Just add to that a bit. That's the worst time at a weekend.
Well, I've got this one piece of wisdom for South Africa. There's no good reason to be out after midnight. Our grandparents were correct. A lot of my dockets, when I open the dockets, the accidents happen in the wee hours of the morning, late at night, a lot of the homicides. So, there's no reason to be out after midnight in South Africa. Just get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow's another day.
Okay, we're all going to stay at home and read your book. Okay, thanks so much. That's Prof Ryan Blumenthal, and his book is called Trace, and you can go back and read his earlier books too, and there's some good wisdom in this book as well. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you're traveling, go carefully, travel safely, look after yourself, and of course, look after others too.